abandoned in lace. The bouquet lay shattered at her feet, petals crushed like promises. Ellie Reeves stood alone in the cold stone chapel, the air thick with the silence left behind by fleeing guests. The altar still bore the weight of candles that had no audience, and her wedding dress, once a symbol of hope, now clung to her like a cruel joke. Her phone buzzed for the last time. Troy's name flashed one final betrayal. You deserve someone your own age. I can't go through with this. No apology. No explanation. Just a sentence that stripped her bare. At 42, Ellie had risked everything for love. Late love, true love, or so she believed. Instead, she found herself discarded like expired fruit. She gripped the chapel pew and breathed deeply, her tears pooling behind her eyes, refusing to fall. Not yet. 30 miles away, Daniel Carter wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better days. His garage was quiet save for the hum of a stubborn engine and the soft hum of his 10-year-old son, Liam, sketching quietly on a workbench. Daniel glanced at him, small, silent, his mother's eyes and his father's quiet resilience. 2 years had passed since cancer stole Claire, and grief still clung to Daniel's shoulders like a second skin. He'd buried love with her, and whatever remained was only duty, to work, to raise Liam, to keep going. He didn't believe in healing, only surviving. Later that afternoon, Daniel stopped by a small roadside cafe for black coffee and a moment of silence. That's when he saw her, a woman in a wedding dress, sitting alone near the window, eyes locked on the steam rising from her untouched tea. He almost walked past. Almost. But something about the defeated slope of her shoulders, the stillness that masked the storm, made him pause. You all right? He asked, quietly. Ellie looked up, startled. Not really, she said with a small, apologetic smile. But I'll manage. He nodded, then hesitated. Look, I'm not trying to be anything. But you shouldn't sit here all day in that dress. You'll catch a cold. I live 10 minutes away. There's an empty room if you need it. Just for a night. She blinked at him, suspicious, cautious, but also tired. Why would you do that? Daniel shrugged. Because I know what it's like to lose someone, even if it's still breathing. The ride to his farmhouse was quiet. Ellie didn't ask questions, and Daniel didn't offer small talk. Liam was already setting the table when they arrived. He looked up, eyes wide at the stranger in white. Ellie forced a smile, gently lowering his suitcase. This is Miss Ellie, Daniel said simply. She's just staying for a night. Liam nodded solemnly, then returned to his plate. At dinner, Ellie sat across from the boy, her fingers wrapped tightly around her fork. She tried to eat, but grief had stolen her appetite. Liam pushed his bread roll toward her plate. You can have mine, he said. Ellie looked at him, her lip trembling. Thank you. After dinner, Daniel showed her to the spare room. It smelled of dust and forgotten things, but it was warm and safe. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the faint pattern in the wallpaper. Thank you for this, she said. Daniel nodded. Don't thank me. Just rest. Tomorrow's a new day. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. You weren't the one who failed. Don't let today make you forget that. And then he was gone. Ellie lay awake for hours. The silence of the house felt unfamiliar, but not unkind. She listened to the soft creak of the walls, the faint sound of a child's laughter once lived, and wondered when her life had become something she no longer recognized. In the next room, Daniel sat by his son's bed. Liam had drawn a picture that evening, a stick-figure man, a boy, and a tall woman in a white dress. They were all holding hands. She's nice, Liam said softly. She's not staying, Daniel replied. But she looks like someone who could stay. Daniel didn't respond. Outside, the wind shifted, and in the warmth of a house stitched together by loss, 3 strangers, a widower, a broken bride, and a quiet boy, began the first night of something none of them had asked for. But maybe, just maybe, everything they needed. The woman in the guest room. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting soft gold across the guest room walls. Ellie stirred, unsure for a moment where she was. Then the memories rushed in, the deserted chapel, the man with grease-stained hands, the quiet boy offering her bread. Her chest ached with the sting of humiliation, but there was warmth beneath it too, a strange, unfamiliar sense of safety. Downstairs, the clatter of dishes and the low murmur of voices guided her toward the kitchen. She appeared in the doorway, hesitant. Daniel looked up from pouring cereal into a chipped bowl. Liam sat at the table, still in pajamas, sketching again. "You hungry?" Daniel asked, his tone neutral. "I could try," Ellie replied, smoothing her borrowed cardigan. She took a seat across from Liam. He slid his drawing toward her without a word. It was another picture, this time of the three of them planting flowers. She blinked rapidly, then smiled. "You're quite the artist," she said softly. Liam grinned, then dug back into his cereal. Daniel handed her a mug of coffee and sat down without ceremony. Silence lingered, but it wasn't uncomfortable, more like a shared truce. "Do you have anywhere to go?" he asked finally. Ellie stayed into her cup. "No, I gave up my apartment for the honeymoon. The lease is gone. Most of my things are in storage." Daniel nodded slowly. "You can stay a few more days. There's work here if you don't mind dust." "I don't mind dust," she said, almost laughing. "I just mind pity." "No one's offering that," he said, more firmly than expected. "You help where you can. You rest when you need to." She studied him, the deep-set eyes, the guarded lines in his jaw, the way he avoided looking directly at her unless necessary. A man folded in on himself, doing everything to stay upright. Later that afternoon, Ellie swept the porch, wiped windows that hadn't been touched in seasons, and aired out old linens. The house responded, quietly, gratefully, as if welcoming the return of care. Liam followed her like a shadow, asking small questions, pointing out things only children notice. A cracked tile shaped like a heart, a cloud that looked like a castle, a hidden robin's nest in the barn. Daniel watched from a distance. He wasn't used to the sound of laughter in the house anymore, or the smell of lemon oil on the furniture. It made him restless. He found Ellie folding laundry, humming to herself in the late afternoon light. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "I know, but it helped me forget everything else." He stood there for a long moment, Liam smiling more. "That hasn't happened in a while." She looked up. "He misses her, doesn't he?" Daniel nodded. "Every day. He's quiet like her, but he carries it deeper." "So do you," she said softly. He didn't answer, just turned away. That evening, Liam asked Ellie to read him a story. She glanced at Daniel for permission. He gave a short nod. As she read, Liam leaned into her side, her voice wrapping around him like a blanket. Daniel watched from the hallway, something tightening in his chest. When the boy finally drifted to sleep, Ellie stepped into the hall and closed the door behind her. They stood facing each other in the dim light. "He asked if I could read tomorrow night too," she said. Daniel nodded slowly. "You can stay. For a while. If you want." Ellie's expression shifted, part relief, part caution. "Is this your kindness talking, or your loneliness?" He looked away, jaw clenched. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said gently, "because I can't be someone's patch. I've already been discarded once this week." His gaze met hers then, steady, serious. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. Just stay, as you are." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ellie nodded, almost imperceptibly. "All right," she whispered. "For now." As she walked back to her room, the sound of Liam breathing deeply behind his door, Daniel leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. He hadn't planned on letting anyone in again. But somehow, the woman in the guest room was already inside. Truths and temptations. Ellie stood barefoot in the garden, the morning dew chilling her skin as she pulled weed from between the vegetables. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Daniel had offered her a place to stay. 2 weeks of silent mornings, quiet dinners, and evenings spent reading Liam to sleep. And yet, each passing day, the silence between her and Daniel felt less empty and more electric. She often caught him watching her, not with hunger, but with hesitation, like a man staring at a painting he wasn't sure he deserved to own. And though neither of them spoke the words aloud, the house had changed. It breathed differently now, lighter, warmer. But just as new roots were beginning to form, old shadows returned. It began with a knock on the front door one dusty afternoon. Daniel was out in the garage. Ellie wiped her hands on her apron and opened it. Standing there was Troy Benson, still immaculate in his tailored suit, sunglasses perched carelessly on his head. "Ellie." His voice was smooth, practiced, the same voice that once whispered forever in her ear. She stiffened. "What do you want?" He stepped inside without waiting. "To talk. To explain. To fix what I broke." Ellie didn't move. "You humiliated me. In front of my family, my friends. You called me too old in a text, Troy." "I panicked," he said, smiling like it still worked. "I made a mistake. I thought marrying you would trap me. But living without you feels worse." Ellie stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You're not here for me. You're here because your pride took a hit." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Look around, Ellie. You're living in a mechanic's house, cooking for someone else's kid. This isn't you." A sharp sound interrupted them, a wrench clattering to the floor. Daniel stood at the hallway's edge, eyes dark. Troy turned. The landlord." He extended a hand mockingly. "Thanks for looking after my fiancée." "She's not yours," Daniel said quietly. Troy's smile curled. "Not yet." Ellie stepped between them. "Stop, both of you. I don't belong to either of you. Not anymore." Troy raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just dinner, one night. To talk. I'll wait at the Monarch. 7 o'clock. If you don't show, I'll get the message." And with that, he was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel turned back toward the garage. "Do what you want." Ellie followed him. "That's it? After everything?" He didn't look at her. "You said yourself, you don't belong to anyone. You're free to decide." Her voice dropped. "So are you." Later that night, Ellie stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. She hadn't decided if she'd go. Part of her wanted closure. Part of her wanted to be wanted, even by the wrong man. She heard footsteps downstairs and the murmur of a familiar voice. Curious, she descended the steps quietly. In the living room stood Melissa Harper, Claire's best friend. Polished, sharp, and always lurking on the edge of Daniel's grief. "I came to check on you," Melissa said, stepping closer to Daniel. "Everyone says you're disappearing. I had to see for myself." Daniel gave her a tired look. "I've been busy." "With what?" she said softly. "Pretending that woman upstairs is your wife." "Don't do this," he warned. Melissa reached out, resting her hand on his chest. "You're lonely, Daniel. You always have been. Claire knew it. I knew it. I've waited long enough." She kissed him, and in that moment of silence, of confusion, of betrayal, Ellie stood frozen at the stairs, unseen. She turned and left the house without a word. Daniel gently pushed Melissa away. "That shouldn't have happened." "But it did," she whispered. "And you didn't stop it." He looked at the empty staircase. A chill crept over him. Ellie didn't return that night. Instead, she sat across from Troy in a quiet booth, wine glass untouched. He was talking, something about Paris, about restarting, but she didn't hear him. She was thinking about a little boy who had drawn her into his family with crayons, about a man who had learned to live with silence, and about the kiss she never saw coming. And for the first time, Ellie realized she had something men like Troy and Daniel could never steal: a choice. The waitress brought the bill. Ellie reached for it. "I'm not coming back," she said quietly. "Not to you. Not to anyone who makes me feel small." She rose and walked out, into the night. The woman who stayed. The house was too quiet. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold hours ago. The overhead bulb flickered slightly, casting soft shadows on the floor. Across from him sat Liam, hunched over his latest drawing, this one unfinished. "She's not coming back," the boy said quietly, not looking up. Daniel closed his eyes. He wanted to lie, to offer hope. But the truth weighed too heavily on his chest. "I don't know," he answered. After Melissa had left, after that reckless kiss, the house had felt colder. Not from the absence of Ellie's hands dusting the windowsills or the warmth of her food on the stove, but from the void she left behind in the very air they breathed. He hadn't chased after her. At least, not right away. A part of him believed he didn't deserve to. But watching Liam scribble with slumped shoulders broke something in him. "I miss her," Liam whispered. "She didn't even say goodbye." Daniel swallowed hard. "She thought I didn't care." "But you do," Liam said, finally meeting his eyes. "Don't you?" He did. He cared so deeply it scared him. He rose abruptly, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door. "Stay here, kiddo. I need to find someone." Ellie stood at the edge of the small-town bus station, suitcase in hand. She hadn't decided where she'd go next. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one knew her as the woman left at the altar or the guest in someone else's home. The dinner with Troy had clarified things. She didn't want a man who spoke in empty promises, or one who let guilt dictate his feelings. She wanted something real, but real love demanded courage, and maybe she was too tired to be brave anymore. The soft roar of a truck pulled her from her thoughts. She turned. Daniel stepped out, wearing the same jacket he'd worn the day they met. His eyes searched hers with a desperation he couldn't hide. "I didn't come to ask you to forgive me," he said. "I came to tell you the truth." Ellie stood still, guarded. "I saw her. I saw you." "I didn't kiss her," he said. "She kissed me, and I let it happen because I didn't know how to say no. Not to her. Not to the memory of my wife. But that moment, it didn't mean anything. And you walking out, that meant everything." She blinked. "Once. Then why didn't you stop me?" "I thought I didn't deserve to," he admitted. "Claire was the only woman I ever loved. Until you. That terrified me." Ellie's breath caught. Daniel stepped closer. "You brought life back into that house. Into Liam. Into me. And I let my fear, and someone else's past, chase you away." He held out a small, crumpled drawing, Liam's. It showed the three of them again. Only now, Ellie wore a bright yellow dress. In her hands were flowers. "He drew this yesterday," Daniel said. "He said it's the day we plant the garden together. You, me, and him." Her fingers trembled as she took it. The boy's handwriting at the bottom read, "The day Mom stayed." Daniel's voice dropped. "You don't have to be anything you're not. Not a mother. Not a wife. Not someone who forgets what she's been through. But I want you there. We both do." Tears welled in her eyes, finally spilling. "I'm not too old for this." He smiled gently. "You're exactly the right age for someone who knows what real love looks like." A bus rolled into the station behind her. She glanced at it and didn't move. Ellie took a step toward him. Then another. "I don't want to be a guest anymore," she whispered. "You're not," Daniel said. "You're home." Back at the farmhouse, Liam looked up as the door opened. Ellie stepped inside, windblown and flushed. He ran to her without a word, wrapping his arms around her waist. She hugged him tightly, resting her cheek on his hair. "Next time," she said softly, "I'll say goodbye only if I mean it." Daniel watched them from the doorway, emotion thick in his throat. That evening, they planted flowers in the front yard. Yellow daisies, purple sage, marigolds. Liam insisted on putting Ellie's name on a sign beside the garden. "Miss Ellie's flowers." As the sun dipped below the hills, Daniel stood beside her, brushing dirt from her cheek. "Welcome home," he whispered. She smiled. She had been abandoned, discarded, and nearly forgotten. But in the place no one expected, she'd found something stronger than a wedding. She'd found a family.